it's Adam jumping in real quick. So, Andy and I recorded quite a few of these episodes before we started publishing it. Recently, we had a conversation about The Invisible Man, and we felt like we should prioritize that over our conversation that we were going to have this week over Lego Batman. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take Lego Batman and we're going to delay that a couple weeks while we prioritize some of our newer episodes over that. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, hello, welcome, subscribe below. You'll see that this room's a little bit different than the room that we've been shooting in. Our first few episodes we actually shot in my living room, but my wonderful wife and producer Kirby actually took some time and helped build an actual studio for us to record in. So for this episode, you're going to see our wonderful new studio, and then eventually the episodes are going to catch up to when we were actually filming in the studio. So thank you and enjoy our episode. Welcome to Real Shame. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
And this is a twice weekly podcast show where we review movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. This episode, we're going to review Invisible Man from 1933. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, we like to talk about what we've been watching. Andy, what have we been watching?
Well, as we both agreed before we started recording today, we actually really haven't seen much of anything outside of the movies that we're going to talk about, which is Invisible Man 1933. Also going to do another episode on 2000's Hollow Man. But we did just recently see the brand new Invisible Man with Elisabeth Moss.
As the attorney representing Adrian's trust, I'm required to read a prepared statement. Cecilia, although our relationship was far from perfect, I thought that you would talk to me rather than run away.
Are you okay?
It's directed by Leigh Whannell, who's also wrote and direct Upgrade, which I thought was a pretty fun movie.
Yep, very good.
For sci-fi movies. So leading into The Invisible Man, even though the trailers weren't that interesting, let's say a little bit.
I thought it looked bad.
They kind of looked a little underwhelming. But knowing, as we talked about, kind of what gets me excited about movies, knowing who's behind it, who wrote it, and who directed it, made me really excited for the movie. So we decided to watch that.
Right.
So what do you think overall about Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man? And we'll announce spoilers before we go into spoilers. So just give us a brief overview of what you think.
I'll try not to spoil too much, and yes, we will warn you ahead of time. So, and actually, before we jump into that, I guess we've sort of decided the way that this show goes. Most of these movies that we're going to talk about are going to be older movies. Yep. So the older movies, we're going to spoil those. I mean, if you haven't seen Citizen Kane or Casablanca or whatever we review, it might be from the 80s or the 90s or something like that. If you haven't seen those before you watch the episode, fair warning, nothing is off the table. We could definitely spoil the ending of Citizen Kane. I think everybody knows what Rosebud is at this point.
I've never seen the movie, and I still know what the ending is.
Okay, well, I'm not going to spoil it, but when we get to that episode, we might spoil that for you or whatever. But these newer films, like you said, we're definitely going to say, all right, spoiler warning, mute this or come back to it later once you've seen the movie if you care about spoilers. Yeah. Some people really don't.
And another rule of thumb, I'm sorry to jump on you. Another rule of thumb with that is if the movie's name is the title of the episode, we're probably going to spoil the movie. Right. We won't announce spoilers for it, but we'll probably spoil it.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Fair warning. I liked Invisible Man. I mean, I thought the trailer looked kind of crappy. Mm-hmm. And, Blumhouse Productions that did the film, I have nothing against Blumhouse Productions, but, we know their sort of business model is to create these pretty modestly budgeted films, and then they release them. A lot of times they make a lot of money. What's his first name? Blum?
Jason Blum.
Jason Blum.
Yeah, so their business model is that they shoot movies for under $10 million. I think the budget's ballooned a little bit, but originally it was around $5 to $6 million. And that way, if those movies make a lot of money, make more than double the price, then it's automatically a profit for them.
Right.
And there's been a lot of behind the scenes stuff with M. Night Shyamalan wanting to reshoot and go higher. And there was another director, I forget his name, wanted to do that, and they kind of conflicted. But overall, that's kind of Blumhouse model is shoot it super cheap by Hollywood standards, under $10 million, and then try to make as much profit as they can.
So when I see a preview for a movie and I know it's Blumhouse, I don't want to say I have low expectations for it, but you know, I don't know, I don't always have the highest expectations for it. And with Invisible Man, every time we saw the trailer, and I feel like we saw the trailer plenty, I was like, I don't know about this. But it came out, it's gotten a lot of good buzz, good reviews. I think it's doing pretty well commercially as far as that goes. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought it was definitely watchable. I didn't think it was great.
Yeah.
What was your take on it?
So we've kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand, and I pretty much thought the same. I think it's better than average. I will push back a little bit because I do think Blumhouse, with their model, they kind of give their directors larger creative control, since the expense to them is so, the risk, you would say, is so cheap.
Yeah.
On their end are so low that they just kind of give their directors money. So you have movies like Ouija, Touch of Evil, or Origin of Evil. Touch of Evil.
Yeah.
Which is a different movie, right?
Yeah.
But you have like these little gems inside of their franchises that they're kind of wholly owned by the writers or the directors, and these like little kind of diamonds in the roughs, right?
Right. But for every Ouija Origin of Evil, you've got Ouija.
Yeah, you
which
got
is
like
really bad.
You got like 12 bad ones.
I guess we've already seen a couple of examples this year. Invisible Man's doing quite well, but it was preceded by Fantasy Island, which is kind of like, So, you know, hit or miss for sure.
So I thought the movie was better than average. You know, I thought it was a really good, solid movie. There's a couple things that I didn't really like about the way it was kind of put together, I guess, a little bit of the story. We kind of talked about this, but I feel like, and I don't think this is necessarily spoilers, because if you've seen the trailer, I think you know where I'm going with this. But the first half of the movie, to me, feels like you're supposed to not be sure whether or not the Invisible Man is real, right? So I think you're supposed to be in Elisabeth Moss's character's head. Cece, I think her name is, or Cecil.
Cecilia, they call her C for sure. Friends call her C, right?
I call her Cece.
Cece, that works.
You're supposed to be in her head, and whether or not that the Invisible Man's real or if she's making this up. But I feel like anyone who walks into this movie knows that there's an Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's the titles giving it away, or maybe the trailer. I just feel like everyone's gonna know it's Invisible Man. So for me, that first half of the movie was just very languid, and it was just very frustrating because I wanted to get to what I would call quote unquote good part, the interesting thing about someone fighting an invisible person or whatnot, and that happened later in the half of the movie. So I just felt like it was just too long of a wait to kind of get into that, right?
Right.
And like I said, I think Lee Winnell's kind of idea behind that was to, you know, get you in kind of Elisabeth Moss's character head, and, you know, she's kind of not sure, so he wanted it to be like that for the audience. But I feel in this case, the audience is already way far ahead of the character on this, and it's just a frustrating viewing experience when you're kind of like that, when you're that far ahead of your character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I felt like the first half of it was pretty slow.
Yeah.
And my biggest beef with this, and I know a lot of people, because I was reading some things on the internet and different people's take on it, a lot of people love this about it. I was not as thrilled about it. I wanted it to be scarier than it actually is. I wanted more, not necessarily I wanted more jump scares, because those honestly can be kind of annoying sometimes, but I just wanted more dread. And there's definitely scenes where I was like, oh crap, what's going to happen? And then nothing happens, and that's fine. Because I think you need a good balance of it. Every time you set somebody up for a jump scare, I don't think there should be a jump scare, obviously, because then that gets really, really annoying and tedious. But there's a lot of scenes with her in a room where she will look and think that maybe he's there.
Yeah.
And nothing happens. And again, that's fine. But it seemed like that happened a lot.
Yeah.
And I was wanting to see some movement, you know, something move very subtly or something, just so you go, oh crap. And because like you said, you can't have an Invisible Man movie without an Invisible Man.
Yeah.
So I would hope that they wouldn't try and make a movie where it was all in her head, but I guess you could.
Yeah,
that would be kind of strange. But
and I totally agree with that point, because I feel like there was not enough Invisible Man doing things in the movie.
Yeah.
Like I felt like you said, I agree with you. There needs to be a balance, right? You need to keep the audience in suspense, whether or not they, something's going to happen or not, because that's part of the enjoyment of watching the movie. But I feel like more often than not, it was nothing's happening.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
It was slow. I mean, and I would say that the second half of the movie, obviously, when it picks up and you do start to see more of what the Invisible Man is doing, and there are fight scenes, and well, not fight scenes to make it sound like the Matrix, but there's definitely a scene where he attacks her.
Yeah.
But
is that spoiler?
Oh yeah, that probably is a spoiler.
All right, so let's we'll admit you have an antagonist and protagonist in a movie, in a horror movie. They're bound to
at some
conflict.
point, yeah, they're gonna fight.
But let's just say now, spoilers for the movie, right?
Spoilers for the movie begin now.
But yeah, go on with your saying. So towards the end of the movie,
I feel like the payoff is good. I was satisfied with the ending, and again, I'm not going to tell you what the ending is or anything like that. But I was satisfied with it. Well, yeah, okay, we can, yeah. But I don't really need to go into it. I was satisfied with the ending. This movie, obviously, it comes in the era of Me Too, and it's very much about this woman who's in an abusive situation, abusive relationship, finally breaking free of that at the beginning of the film, and then her husband is still controlling her, still kind of mentally taunting and haunting her, but she fights back, which is great. And I think Elisabeth Moss does quite a good job in this. I haven't, honestly, because I have not watched The Handmaid's Tale, so I haven't. I feel like I haven't had that much exposure to her, but I thought she did a fine job.
Because she was like on West Wing for a long time, because she was President Bartlett's daughter.
Watched, yeah.
And she was on Mad Men.
Never watched.
Which I only watched the first season of. So maybe those are things we can talk about.
Right.
But I think, to jump back to what you were talking about her kind of, so what they call it now is gaslighting, right, is the term. And I think that's based off of a movie from the early 1990s.
Old classic movie with Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman.
And so that's actually made me want to watch that movie.
Yeah.
A little bit, because I think that would pair well with this kind of movie. But I do think they handle how threatening her husband is pretty well in this movie.
Yeah.
Because you don't have like a gratuitous showing of how controlling he is. I think they make it, Lee Winnell makes it very succinct. And when you get that outburst of violence from him, like when he punches that car window, I think that says enough that you need for a whole movie. So I'm glad they don't really spend a lot of time kind of in him being abusive to her. I think that one scene just sells it, and it's well done.
Agreed. We don't need any more than that. I totally agree.
The other thing I really liked about this movie is I like that they took it more sci-fi with the Invisible Man. So I like that it's a suit and not necessarily a change to his body composition or whatever. It's not that kind of stuff, because with the Invisible Man that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and Hollow Man, it's different serums are derived from different things,
right?
Different MacGuffins, I would guess.
Yeah.
But I like that it's a very cool looking suit. The sound effects that they have for the suit, this kind of slithering lizard like kind of sound effect, was very cool, very unnerving, like on a human level.
I saw somebody on the internet describe it as almost Predator-like, which I agree with. It does kind of make this sound like he makes in the Predator when he's invisible and whatnot.
For sure.
To give it away to the audience that he's there.
And there's a couple twists in there. One of them I kind of saw coming, but one of them I didn't, which was very cool and very interesting. But overall, I thought it was a really solid movie. I'm glad we saw it. And anything else you want to add about that?
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like I was, again, I thought it was good, not great. I felt a little bit, even though it's kind of weird to say that from the trailer, I thought it looked bad. But yet when I went in, somehow I had these higher expectations. But I think that was just because the advanced buzz on it was so good. So I think my expectations kind of spiked a little bit. The more I kind of thought about it at home, I mean, I could definitely see myself watching this again at home, like putting it on streaming or something at some point. I feel like it's probably going to get better for me with time. I think maybe just it was the initial seeing it. I was like, eh.
It's very hard to kind of temper those expectations because, with people like us, I'm reading, film reviews, paying attention to film podcasts, and I know there's a couple of movie websites you pay attention to. So this early buzz will sometimes make or break a movie for us, I feel like. So it's really hard to kind of tamper your expectations or kind of go into it not expecting too much when the buzz is so good.
Right. And especially when you go to the movie theater as much as we do and you see the same trailers over and over and over, sometimes that can kind of kill something for us a little bit.
Yeah.
Try not to, but sometimes you just can't help it.
And we were speculating that who's going to be the Invisible Man next and whether it's going to be Invisible Woman.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if this film, it looks like it's doing quite well. I mean, why wouldn't they make some sort of sequel to it? I don't know exactly where they would go with it, but again, spoiler alert, at the end of the film, she's got the suit.
Yep.
Right? That makes you invisible. So
her police officer friend just seems cool with it, which is I thought for sure I thought that was going to be the end of their friendship. Like I really thought that, he was that, the way he kind of played it, I thought he was been like, all right, you took it too far.
Yeah.
Because I know he was like he had her back, and he was, a positive influence and a positive role model for her. I don't know if role model is the right word, but I know he definitely wanted to support her, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like maybe that what she did to her husband was just one step too far. And
I think so, and it didn't really seem that believable to me that he would be. Of course, I mean, he was definitely conflicted. His face and everything. He was just like, "Well, what'd you do?" Like, "Oh," or whatever. But I don't know that he seemed like too honest and too good of a guy to just be like, "All right, cool," Which he wasn't that nonchalant, but
I think that actor's great. Like, he was definitely affable. He fits the part really well. Like, I would see more. I'd like to see more of him in that character, or more of him in more movies.
Again, big spoilers ahead, so earmuffs if you want. I did read some complaints, and I thought about this while we were watching it, but I did read some complaints about when he's getting attacked in the hallway by the Invisible Man, and they're like, that guy was jacked. How in the world would he, he would just be able to grab on, even if you can't see him, he'd be able to grab onto him and just pummel it, because his arms are like friggin' tanks or something.
He wears this one like gray, gray, what's it called, with sleeveless shirt or whatever, and you can see his arm, just like all these muscles and stuff.
Right, I think his triceps were bigger than my head.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But then the other people were like, look, the guy was basically sucker punching him, which is like, that's true. I mean, you don't know where the punch is coming from. You're going to get walloped. I mean, you can't defend yourself. You're not, so I didn't really take too much issue with that. But I was actually thinking about that in the movie. I was like, man, he's getting his butt kicked, and he's huge.
And there's a couple of things I want to say is, when we actually get to the action with the Invisible Man, I think it's very cool. Like, so I enjoy, the restaurant scene was awesome. Like, actually, I kind of yelled out, like, holy shit, whenever that happened.
That seems to be, the restaurant scene seems to be the most tense part, and the part where the audience is like, just kind of let out like a collective gasp.
It was awesome.
It's definitely, it's a great scene. It's very cool.
And I think, I think the house fight with Elisabeth Moss was really well done. And I think, also the one with the cop dad and his daughter and Elisabeth Moss was really well done too. So I just wish we had more of that in the movie, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is not really, it's on the subject, but that girl, I was like, where have I seen that girl? It's because she's the girl from A Wrinkle in Time. She's gotten a little taller.
Oh yeah.
But that's the girl from A Wrinkle in Time, the girl that plays the daughter in Sydney. Yeah. But I was like, where have I seen her? And then of course when I got home, I was like, oh yeah, in A Wrinkle in Time. That's what it was. But the effects were really cool. Obviously, I mean, I would hope in 2020 we can do some really cool Invisible Man effects, and I didn't think they disappointed. And that's, again, kind of funny when we're about to jump into 1933's Invisible Man. Yeah. Those effects, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love them. I mean, because they're practical.
I will say they still hold up.
Yeah, I mean, I but they're also kind of funny, and I definitely, I mean, you can see some wires here and there or whatever, but still, I loved it. I mean, I love those effects. I think they're pretty funny. But we've come a long way in that amount of time.
Why don't we get into that then?
Let's do it.
I told you not to disturb me.
It's only the mustard, sir. I forgot it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And that's directed by James Whale.
James Whale.
And this is the movie that we thought I haven't seen, but actually both of us haven't
Yeah,
seen.
I thought I'd seen all the Universal monster movies,
Which
and
I
I have
take
not.
offense because I don't feel like this is a monster at all.
Yeah, so that I agree,
Yeah.
and I'm not so sure about the Mummy either. But those are all lumped into. Apparently, that was like the first shared universe, is what I was
yeah.
reading. So you've got
Before Monster
Frankenstein,
Squad.
even Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, even before Monster Squad, even Phantom of the Opera is apparently in that universe. Phantom of the
Really?
Opera, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Werewolf, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and I want to say Hunchback of Notre Dame is in there, but maybe I just misread that.
Maybe
But
we should fact check that.
forget Quasimodo, but the rest of those guys are apparently all within the same Universal shared universe, which is why, of course, they wanted to redo, what was it, the Dark Universe or
Yeah, the
whatever,
Dark Universe,
with the Mummy was
with
supposed
the
to be the start of
Mummy.
that.
Yep.
With
And
Tom
they had like
Cruise
Brides
and-
of Frankenstein that was in production, and which I think still can come out. But I think with this Invisible Man 2020 doing so well, this might actually be the reboot they want.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. But yeah, neither one of us had ever seen the Invisible Man, so it was definitely an experience. I don't know, what did you think? What were your thoughts?
A little bit. So Invisible Man is based off an H.G. Wells novel,
Right.
and I actually thought it was pretty good. I had a lot of fun with it. I think
I did too.
some of it's funnier than I think it probably played back then.
Definitely.
But I'm surprised on how well the special effects held up. Because they did a lot of things, like you could tell when the shirt was floating around, that was definitely like a Pepper's Ghost kind of illusion, where they're basically they're using a sheet of glass to kind of separate two almost identical halves, and then the shirt is someone wearing like black velvet, and then they have the shirt going around and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking at also some of the special effects behind it. A lot of them, they use the same kind of special effects that George Méliès used.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's using black velvet on black, and that's just easy to kind of paint over back then on the actual film strip. So I was really surprised with the special effects and how well that it held up. And it was all done pretty much in camera practically. And that's actually something I kind of wanted to see with the new Invisible Man. More like, using a wire to kind of move clothes around or move a knife around. I feel like, now with modern movies, and I think we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this on podcasts, but I think more modern movies kind of rely on special effects way more than they need to. It's almost like, of course, we don't make movies, but that being said, I feel like there's not a lot of planning being done, and they kind of fix a lot more in post than they probably should have to, I would say, if they planned more.
Right.
So that being said, super fun movie. I thought the effects were really good and really well done. I'm surprised on how short it was.
Yeah. Super short.
It was super short. But I loved how, like, you don't have the first act of the movie. It's basically the movie doesn't have. I would say the movie doesn't really have a first act and doesn't really have a third act. The first act would be in a traditional movie. I would say him kind of trying to get to that part where he gets the
Make
formula,
himself
right?
invisible,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And him working away, and then he gets invisible, and then that starts. I would say kind of starts the journey into Act 2, right?
Right.
So I love that, like, scene 1, you see him, he's already invisible, right? And he's trying to get out from being invisible. He doesn't want to be invisible anymore.
Right.
It was either an accident or whatnot. So I thought that was super cool how they kind of jump started that, and there wasn't like a long build up to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because again, not having seen the movie, thinking I'd seen the movie, but not actually having seen the movie, I assumed it would start that way. I thought he was going to be in a laboratory or something like that. He's going to be like, oh, let me drink this. But no, he comes in, he's already creepy looking because he's wrapped from head to toe with his little goggles and whatnot.
And I've never seen a still from the movie, so I didn't know how he was going to look until I watched Marriage Story. And Marriage Story kind of spoiled that look for me.
Oh, okay.
Because that's how Adam Driver's character dresses for Halloween, when he was trying to dress up for Halloween.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
That kind of spoiled that for me, but it wasn't like a huge spoiler.
Right. And that's the most interesting thing about this movie is that Claude Rains plays the Invisible Man. Claude Rains has a very long career playing lots of different things. He's in the movie immediately jumps into my mind is he's the villain again in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. But you don't see Claude Rains until the very end, whenever he is. And again, we're spoiling things. I said we wouldn't say spoilers, but he dies. He dies at the end. And he's in the hospital bed, and he finally regains he loses the invisibility. He regains his form, and that's literally the only time that you see Claude Rains in the movie. But I agree with you. I had a lot of fun watching this film. I didn't quite know what to expect. Again, having seen Frankenstein, it's been a while, but it seems a little more serious. And Frankenstein, let's see, that was also directed by James Whale. That's right. I want to make sure I was like, not Dracula. Yeah, James Whale did Frankenstein. He did Bride of Frankenstein as well. He directed both of those. But Frankenstein seems to be a little more serious. Dracula seems to be a little more serious. This movie definitely has a lot of humor. I do think a lot of the humor now, stuff that I found funny, I don't think was meant to be funny back then. But it doesn't matter. You had a good time with it. You mentioned the first police officer they're like, oh, he's invisible or whatever. He's up there. He won't leave the hotel room or the inn. Basically, he's got a room at the inn, and I just love this guy is so
he's unfazed.
And he's just so stereotypical, just like, what's all this then? Just with the accent and the walrus mustache.
But he's not like scared of him at all.
He's just like,
these people are like,
whatever.
Yeah, these people are like, there's an invisible man. He's like, okay, I'll go take care of it.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't ask questions. He's not like, you guys are crazy. He's like, all right, you tell me there's an invisible man.
Okay.
I'm gonna go up these stairs and I'm gonna tell him to get the hell out of the inn.
Yeah.
Like he's just very like unfazed, matter of fact. He does kind of have this whole like. Doesn't take place in the South, but he does have this kind of old Southern drawl kind of way of talking. But I just love, that's the one thing I started laughing about a lot was just him the whole time was just completely unfazed by the whole thing.
Right.
Like you would imagine people would be like freaking out and stuff like that.
I was laughing a lot. So after he goes up there, they have a fight. The Invisible Man basically strips, right? Because so that way they can't see him. So he's running around naked. But I was laughing at all just the mischievousness of him. He's running down the street. He's taking some old guy's hat off and throwing it in the water. He's even such a jerk. He knocks a lady's baby carriage over. Like the poor kid. I mean, it doesn't show like a baby tumble out or anything, but still. And he steals somebody's bicycle and he throws the bicycle at him. I mean, he's just a jerk. But then he amps it to 1,000 later on in the movie. He derails the friggin' train.
I love this part because like like you said, the whole time he's just like doing these kind of mischievous kind of things. And it's just like they don't hurt anyone. They're just like he's just being an asshole.
He's gonna give somebody a wedgie.
Yeah, he's just being an asshole. And all of a sudden he walks into this blank room and has all these levers. He's like pulling these levers, and the next scene is you see this train just get derailed like off a mountainside, just kind of roll down. I was reading IMDb and like supposedly he has the most on-screen deaths. it's like in the hundreds.
He graduated from taking a guy's hat and stealing a guy's bike to causing a train to go off the side of the mountain and all these people die in a horrific death. Yeah, he's a homicidal maniac like at that point.
It is crazy how like and that the movie plays it like super nonchalant.
Yeah,
like it's the same as like stealing someone's bicycle.
I think he does mention to Kemp or whatever the guy's name, the guy that he basically holds hostage and says like, "You're my partner." He does say he's gonna do something to a train. I believe. I think there's a line there, but I'd kind of forgotten about it by that point. And then he walks into because he's talking about we're gonna kill people. We're gonna kill not famous people or not important people. We'll kill important people and all that stuff. But then he doesn't do anything for a long time. And then suddenly there's just this thing, like you said, he walks in. First of all, he knocks the guy out, like he bashes a glass over his head. The guy who's responsible for doing the train stuff. And and then he derails the train.
Traffic controller, whoever that is.
Yeah. But the one thing about it, in our next episode, we're going to talk about Hollow Man from 2000 with Kevin Bacon, which is also an Invisible Man movie. But I don't want to jump too far ahead, but Hollow Man, one of my biggest beefs with Hollow Man is that I don't really buy Kevin Bacon turning into this homicidal maniac like he does kind of towards the end of that movie and starts killing everybody. But at least in this, they just kind of are like, well, he's been experimenting with monocaine and it tends to make you crazy. And I was like, all right, that's all I needed.
Yeah, you
that's
just need that
why
one
he's such
line.
that's why he's such a raving lunatic, you know, because I'm assuming they were kind of playing off of Mercury or whatever. Oh, Mercury will turn you into the Mad Hatter, you know, they use it in hats or whatever. But that was enough for me. I was just like, oh, well I buy his raving lunacy.
That's
just because he worked with monocaine.
That's a good point. For me, it felt a little bipolar, right? Because sometimes he was super mischievous, but then he did the thing where he derailed a train,
yeah.
right? And then he tried to kill his old partner. So for me, that didn't play well. I was hoping for more of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, where, especially going into this knowing like the Invisible Man's a universal monster, like thinking like, okay, this is going to be a monstrous person, or this is going to do monstrous things, and just waiting for that to happen. So
Yeah.
I kept on expecting for him to be the acts he does to be more violent and more elevated and more monstrous.
Yeah.
Which I really didn't get. So I can understand them kind of explaining away and saying that whatever he's using, the monocaine, is what makes him crazy. I just kind of wish they kind of amped it up a bit, and maybe that's more.
You wanted to see him derail another train.
Yes.
Okay.
Or maybe that's more telling for the times. I wanted him to bite someone.
Yes.
Invisible bite marks. The other thing that kind of caught me off guard a little. Well, there's two things I want to talk about more story wise. One was, I really feel like he doesn't really have an antagonist, and I say that in the way of saying that to me the story doesn't feel fully complete. It doesn't feel like a full story. It feels more episodic, and it doesn't really feel like it has a beginning and an end to me. And in that, I think part of the reason, and I was trying to evaluate why I felt that way, I think it's because he doesn't really have an antagonist. He does have his partner that he's kind of going against and stuff like that, but I feel like they really just don't have a protagonist kind of antagonist relationship.
Yeah. And
I'm really surprised on how fast they wrap up the movie. I feel like the last 5 minutes are like lightning quick. Like they're just like, we got to do this.
Well,
like it feels like it's very compressed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the what's his name? Henry Travers, who plays his old mentor or whatever, and everybody knows Henry Travers as Clarence from. You haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, I don't think, but he plays Clarence, the angel Clarence, in It's a Wonderful Life. So that's probably his best known role. He and his daughter, who's played by Gloria Stewart. Gloria Stewart, recognize her?
No.
So she's in a ton of movies back in the day, but the movie that probably everybody knows her from is a little movie that came out in the 90s about a big boat that hits an iceberg and sinks.
Okay.
She's Old Rose.
Oh, she Old Rose?
So the daughter in this film, the daughter of I don't remember the character's name, but the daughter of the doctor, the good doctor, is Gloria Stewart. Young Gloria Stewart.
The one that's dating the Invisible guy.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's kind of the love interest, I guess, of the Invisible Man, although they don't have much. But so much of the story went on without them, right? I mean, that's what I thought was weird. They introduced those characters, and he's there to kind of give the exposition about, well, he was working with this monocaine and this formula or whatever. And then they just kind of disappear for a long time. And every once in a while, like, he gets a call from Kemp, and he's like, no, whatever. And they go over to the house. But then again, they disappear for a long stretch. So at the end of the movie, whenever they killed the Invisible Man, I was like, are they going to bring the doctor and his daughter back, or are they just out of the story completely? I thought that was a really weird thing. I mean, I felt like they needed to have him have like a love interest, have something that tried to be the voice of reason to him. But they seemed very underutilized.
Yeah, and I feel like in a modern movie, that love story would have probably been beefed up, and she would have been there pleading or been there at the barn fire and all that kind of stuff for sure.
The barn fire.
I put in my notes. Seems a bit excessive.
I mean, I wouldn't like that if I'm like, hey, police, the Invisible Man's in my barn, and they're like, okay, cool, we're gonna burn it down.
Did you notice that guy's facial hair? Too?
I did. Yeah.
He had like a beard like from here, but this was like shaved.
Yeah.
And this was shaved. It was hilarious. But
I was like, and the policeman even says like, oh, you're going to get £1,000 reward for this or something like that. And I'm like, is that going to cover the cost of his barn?
Well, it was like
He's
like
well, my barn cost £10,000.
It was like £1 a night to stay at the inn or something around that. So
okay, so I guess £1,000 was quite a bit, whatever it was. But yeah, they just burned the port because they mentioned like, oh, we'll smoke him out, and I thought, oh, well, they're just going to light something around the barn, but not actually ignite the barn and just burn it to the ground. So yeah, I thought that was a bit extreme as well.
It was very extreme.
Like, what the hell are they doing here?
The other thing that I put in my notes that was really interesting is that, so as you said earlier, he has to strip completely naked to be invisible, and he's running around and it's winter.
Yes.
So like I would worry about like frostbite on like toes and fingers and other things.
Yes.
But yeah, he's just like basically running around naked doing all these things, which is, when you start rationalizing thinking about it, it's pretty hilarious, I think.
Yeah, well, and you and I talked about it. I just love the fact that he throws things at people or he hits them or something like that. And I mean, yes, he's invisible, but he's still right there and he's solid. But they just react like screaming and run away. I mean, there's no real effort.
Yeah.
I mean, later in the movie there is. They get like nets and they try and make like a human chain to,
And I think
stop
that's
him.
very cool, very smart.
It is, but again, there's one part where he picks the guy up by his legs.
His trousers.
Clearly, he's got him by his legs. Nobody tries to let the guy go and go, oh, let's grab him because he's got a hold of this guy's legs. They're just like, oh no, what are we doing? But they won't break the chain. It's
I'm sure
you should,
I'm sure to do that effect, it probably required that there's a free area.
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
In my head too, I also see that as kind of like the kung fu waiting, like the next enemy bad guy in the kung fu fights waiting to get his butt kicked.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw that too as like, oh wait, he's dispatching this one cop and then the next one's going to step up and take his licks.
Well, and of course with a movie like this, and even honestly with a movie like The Invisible Man, the 2020 version, you can't start nitpicking it like that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I mentioned that, but I mentioned that I guess only half seriously, because I know, again, logic is not going to be these movies' strong suit, right? So,
but I was really worried getting into it because I was worried that I was just going to be bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a brisk movie.
Even looking at it in a 2020 kind of context.
Right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I like I say, I did as well. I did want to say point out a few people from the cat. Well, first of all, so it was directed by James Whale. We've already mentioned that. He directed Frankenstein. He directed Bride of Frankenstein. He directed another movie that has Gloria Stewart from Titanic in it called The Old Dark House, which is also a really good movie. It's also got Boris Karloff. Not Korloff, Karloff. And then his career kind of dried up in the mid-30s. I think he directed a few films after that. He directed the original version of Showboat with Irene Dunne. The movie was produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., and Carl Laemmle Sr. founded or co-founded Universal Studios and was the owner. And so Carl Laemmle Jr., his son, was, I think, in his 20s when he started producing movies at Universal, and he produced a ton of movies from the 20s all the way up until the mid-30s, but then apparently he was spending too much money or something like that, and the Laemmles were forced out of Universal, and they didn't really work in the movie industry, I believe, after that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. What did you think about... So I've got here my notes. Una O'Connor, she is the older woman that runs the inn. My God, her shrieks, her histrionics. It was like piercing my ears, like with her screaming. I was like, my God, it's like a howling banshee.
What was that word? Histrionics?
Histrionics, yeah. It's just like crazy hysterics, basically, yeah.
Yeah, but her voice was definitely, I would use the word shrill.
Yes, she got on my nerves. There's one thing about this movie that got on my nerves, it was her.
But I liked how no nonsense her husband was. Yeah. I mean, he was kind of like, I really don't want to kick him out now. Right. But she's like, go up there and kick him out. I just like how pretty much everyone just like, there's no like, oh my God, this guy's invisible. There's no like shock or surprise. Everyone's just like, hey, you there. I know you're invisible, but it doesn't matter. You're like a real person. Why don't you get out of this room right now? Like everyone treats it like as a, like, yeah, of course this guy's invisible. Like
invisible or not, you still got to pay.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I liked how they did that. Like everyone treated him like no nonsense and stuff like that.
Right.
It was only when he started being mischievous around the town that it started, people started acting irrationally, I would say. The other thing I read on IMDb that I thought was interesting that kind of goes in with our past episodes is apparently Mark Hamill based his portrayal of the Joker off of...
Yeah, I read that too.
I hope that's true.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So Una O'Connor, and here's like just kind of a weird thing. I mean, I guess it's not that weird. So Max von Sydow just recently passed away.
Yep.
And so I was looking on Wikipedia at some recent just to see if there's anybody else that has passed away recently that I didn't know about in the world of Hollywood or the acting world. Did you ever see the Barbarian Brothers or the Barbarians?
No.
So there was
That's
twin.
like Conan and Arnold the Barbarian.
Yeah, so it's just like a knockoff of
Okay.
that. But there was these twin bodybuilder guys. They're actually in a deleted scene from Natural Born Killers. Apparently, one of those guys,
Yeah.
David Paul, I think is his name. He died. His brother's name is Peter Paul, not Peter Paul and Mary, but just Peter Paul. But David Paul recently passed away. But I was looking through and I saw Una O'Connor died. And I was like, that can't be the same Una O'Connor because she's pretty old in Invisible Man. Of course, it's not. But I was like, what are the odds? There's an Una O'Connor. It's another. She plays Kamaji or something like some sport that I've never heard of. I don't know. But also in the cast, sorry, that's an aside. That's just like you're like, yeah, who cares?
This day
also
in your
in the
movie
cast,
trivia.
right? It's Walter Brennan plays a very very small role when the police. The police is interviewing all the suspects. He doesn't believe that the Invisible Man is real. Walter Brennan, I believe, is one of the guys in there that says, like, oh, he stole a bicycle or something like that. And Walter Brennan is the guy, he's in a ton of Westerns, and he's the guy that always talks like this. That's Walter Brennan. That's my bad Walter Brennan impersonation.
This
also,
is why people tune into this
I know.
podcast.
Okay. John Carradine is in the movie, and I recognized Walter Brennan when I saw it. I didn't recognize
Is he
John
the dad
Carradine.
of Keith Carradine?
Yes, he is Keith, Robert, and David's dad, John Carradine. So he's in a ton of movies, and actually towards the end of his life, he was like Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. He didn't say no to anything that came his way. So he is in a ton of crappy, really bad horror movies from the 70s and 80s.
That's awesome.
But he's in a lot of classic films, like he's in The Grapes of Wrath and some other things like that. But he calls in, he's the one that says something about like, oh, you can put ink on him or whatever to like, so you can see him. Or because people were like, oh, well, if you wait till it's cold,
Yeah,
you
and
can see his
the
breath.
police chief's like, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But then like later on, you have like the guy with the spray gun, like the old, which I thought was a good idea. Like that seems like a pretty good way of finding him. That's our review of the original Invisible Man. We both say it's good, even for 2020. Looking back on it, like you said, some of the effects I think they still hold up. I think they still look cool. It's definitely a fun movie to watch. And I was gonna ask, have you seen any of the sequels? I have not seen the sequels.
Yeah, so we can get to work on those. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see more of those kind of Invisible Man. Maybe he gets crazier, and then we can see why he's a universal monster.